Hi there, I'm Umesh Singh and welcome to Themyscira. It is a land of magic and wonder worth cherishing in every way. But today we'll be journeying into the world of mankind, where we'll delve into the stunning opening sequence of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Note that this video will freely discuss various aspects of the film, some of which could be considered spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers, then go ahead and watch the film before continuing with this video. You have been warned. So I'll start with a surface level rundown of the sequence, then dig deeper to explore motifs, references and visual storytelling. So let's jump right in. At first we see a funeral procession with accompanying voiceover. There was a time above, a time before. There were perfect things, diamond absolutes. How things fall, things on earth. And what falls is fallen. We then see the young Bruce Wayne splitting off from the funeral procession and running off into the woods. The filmmakers then intercut scenes of the killing of Bruce Wayne's parents as we see the young boy falling into the cave of bats. The sequence closes with a colony of bats swarming around young Bruce as he rises up out of the cave. This is accompanied by Bruce Wayne's voiceover. In the dream, they took me into the light, a beautiful lie. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the motifs. The most prominent motif in the sequence is falling. We see leaves, snow, sparks, Thomas, Bruce, a bullet casing, Martha, and pearls, all falling. Later in the film, there are numerous visual parallels that draw from images that are set up here in this sequence. Bruce and Lois trip. Superman is made to fall in a way that mimics the one young Bruce Wayne suffered. In their moments of death, we see Martha and Thomas with hand outstretched and eyes still open. This posture is mirrored in Superman, whose death at the end of the film too is depicted with hand outstretched and eyes hauntingly still open. The film opens with twin funerals of Martha and Thomas Wayne, and the film closes with the twin funerals of Superman and Clark Kent. Superman receives a lavish military funeral where the government buries an empty casket, while a modest civilian funeral is held for Clark Kent, where his actual remains are buried. Above and below. At times, we have a God's eye view, or in the case of the city of Gotham, a more appropriate term might be a gargoyle's eye view. But later in the film, we see the camera positioning and shot composition often highlighting the power discrepancy between characters on screen. A notable visual payoff occurs during the Martha rescue scene, where we see the action of Bruce Wayne's fall into the cave of bats being inverted. So instead of him descending into the ground, we see him rise out of the floor. He then has the high ground as he looms over the thugs who've kidnapped Martha Kent. The void is the black hole that consumes. We see it in the mausoleum, the muzzle of the gun, the ejection port, and the cave of bats. Bruce runs into a forest without a clear path. Later, we see him once again wading through overgrown fields. But finally, at the end of the film, he has a clearly defined path. Bruce Wayne suffers from nightmares throughout the film. In The Beautiful Lie, Bruce is falling and alone in the dark. He has a nightmare in which he is attacked by a monstrous vampire bat. And later in the film, he has a nightmare where he sees the world ravaged by apocalyptic plagues. The opening sound of the film is a bell with a high piano note repeated. This contrasts considerably with the deep bass sounds we hear as Zod and Superman duke it out. Also as Batman lures Superman before the gladiator battle. The disparity between the pitch of these notes highlights the depths to which Batman as a character has fallen in the context of the film. In terms of the comics, the repeating piano note could also refer to the Mother Box. This is repeated by Lex when Batman visits him in jail.
Ding, 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 ding. Ding, 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 ding.
So let's look at some references now. I mentioned twin funerals before, and here there's a slight tangent. The poet Dante, who wrote the Divine Comedy, he also had two burial sites, a grand cenotaph in the city of Florence, which has always remained empty, and another more modest tomb in Ravenna, where his actual remains rest. In terms of the Divine Comedy itself, let's just run through the first few lines of it.
Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita, mi ritrovai per una selva oscura, che la diritta via era smarrita. Hai quanto a dir qual era e cosa dura, esta selva selvaggia e aspra e forte, che nel pensier rinnova la paura.
In the middle of the journey of our life, I came to myself in a dark wood, where the straight way was lost. Ah, how hard a thing it is to tell what a wild and rough and stubborn wood this was, which in my thought renews the fear.
The Passion of Joan of Arc is one of my top 5 favorite films of all time. In the film, director Carl Theodor Dreyer uses an extreme tilt shot, inverting the image. Dreyer shows the villagers as they gather to witness the execution of Joan of Arc. The inversion emphasizes the madness and the injustice of a world where men believing themselves to be righteous have sentenced the honorable character of Joan of Arc to death. In Batman v Superman, Zack Snyder similarly uses an extreme tilt shot, inverting the image. Snyder frames Bruce Wayne inverted, and the shot is sequenced just before we see the killing of both parents. Here the inversion serves not only to show how Bruce's world is turned upside down by the horrific event, but also subtly previews his mimicking of a bat, which are commonly thought of as hanging upside down. In terms of the narrative parallel, Batman too, believing himself to be justified, will wrongfully endeavor to kill the honorable character of Superman. Zorro has always been a strong influence on Batman, who too takes on the role of a masked vigilante draped in black. The protagonist of The Mark of Zorro is Don Diego Vega. If you break down the meaning of his name, it's a Spanish name. Diego in Spanish means the one who supplants or replaces, and Vega means valley or bottom, and is rooted in the Arabic word, and apologies if my pronunciation is off, waka, which means he fell. In The Beautiful Lie, it is Bruce that has fallen into the cave of bats, and it is the Batman that replaces him at the bottom. It is this Batman persona that emerges from the cave, not truly Bruce Wayne himself. An iconic aspect of Zorro is how he marks enemies of the people. Batman, seeing the failures of the institutions of justice due to fear and corruption, takes a leaf out of Zorro's playbook, but unlike the superficial Z cut into items of clothing or property by Zorro, Batman is far more brutal. He marks criminals directly. He burns the Bat brand into their flesh so that they wear it as a badge of dishonor. He treats them like the animals that he believes them to be. At the end of the gladiator battle, Batman also marks Superman, cutting his face, reminiscent of the way that the scout ship cut through the skyline of Metropolis. Coming back to the poster quickly, we can also see Zorro's sword piercing through the letter Z. This previews how Batman's kryptonite spear will be used to kill Zod's reincarnation Doomsday. Also, the Z mirrored would resemble an S, so it also foreshadows Superman's death, as he will be pierced through the Superman emblem in the final battle. In The Godfather Part 3, Mary Corleone is gunned down. Michael, her father, lets out a scream that is muted in post-production. This muted scream is a motif present in all three Trinity hero films. In Man of Steel, we see it with the death of Jonathan Kent. In Batman v Superman, with the death of Martha Wayne. And finally in Wonder Woman, with the death of Steve Trevor. Citizen Kane is a film about a billionaire whom, after years of struggling to control the external world, finally finds the answer to his deep psychological need. And it is the snow globe that serves as a trigger to his childhood memory that I believe finally brings Kane some peace. We see the snow globe falling from Kane's hand as he utters the word Rosebud. In Batman v Superman, Bruce Wayne is the billionaire whom, after years of struggling to make sense of the world by force and failing,
The world only makes sense if you force it to.
finally comes to a point where he can discover his deep psychological need. In the film, this need is symbolized in his dream by the pearl which falls from Martha's hand into the stormwater drain. It is his father's dying word, Martha, repeated by Superman, that serves as the psychological trigger that shakes Bruce out of his blind rage, long enough for Lois to arrive on the scene and bring some clarity to the situation. I recently did a collaborative video with the JLU podcast, illustrating connections between Batman v Superman and John Boorman's Excalibur. In addition to the numerous deeper plot and thematic connections brought up in that analysis, there are also a couple of references that I've also noticed. In BVS, we see young Bruce who runs into the woods without a path, which parallels the way that the young Arthur runs into the woods without a path. Secondly, the dying Lancelot says,
Arthur.
which parallels the dying Thomas Wayne, who says,
Martha.
In Man of Steel, it is the death of Jonathan Kent that haunts Clark. It is the tornado that sets him on an odyssey, his journey of self-discovery. And it is ultimately Jor-El who becomes his guide that shows him the way. Similarly, in Batman v Superman, it is the deaths of Thomas and Martha Wayne that haunt Bruce. But unlike Clark, the tornado represents a kind of loss of self and sets Bruce on a path of vigilantism and vengeance. In Man of Steel, we see Clark as he's unconscious and under the water. It is his memory of
Can you see
Martha
it?
Kent and her words that is able to bring him back.
I see it.
Then swim towards it, honey.
In Batman v Superman, we also see a backlit shot as Bruce Wayne is falling into the Cave of Bats. This is his moment of crisis. He does not recover from this for a very long time, but eventually it is Martha Kent who is also the key to bringing him out.
Say that name on. Find him. Save Martha.
In Man of Steel, we see the birth of the Superman as he destroys the Kryptonian world engine over the Indian Ocean. As he lays on the ground exhausted, we see Superman reaching towards the light. Superman is empowered by the light. By contrast, in Batman v Superman, we see Thomas Wayne as he lays on the ground dying, his arm outstretched. This is the birth of the Batman, as Bruce will subsequently retreat into the shadows. So unlike Superman, the Batman is empowered by darkness. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy believes that a tornado transports her to an alternate dream world of Oz. In The Beautiful Lie, Bruce Wayne is already in a dream world, reliving the traumatic memory of witnessing his parents being killed. And it is the tornado of bats that he believes transports him out of this nightmare and up into the light. So let's take another look with a bit more of an interpretive eye. As the funeral procession approaches the Wayne Mausoleum, the caskets with their curved black lids resemble the top of the Colt handgun, and the gap between the caskets resembles the ejection port on the slide of the gun. The gun fires. We see the slide move and the ejection port opens, spitting out a shell casing. And then as the slide returns, the ejection port is closed, like a dark mouth consuming. The very next shot is that of Bruce being swallowed by the ground, the dark void. As young Bruce falls, so does the casing. The casing hits the ground. At the bottom of the cave, Bruce finds the Batman. And it is the Batman persona that rises to the surface. Looking back at the bullet casing, when it hits the ground, it rebounds, but what returns upwards is nothing but a hollow shell.
You're nothing but a hollow shell. Nothing but a hollow shell. Nothing but a hollow shell. Nothing but a hollow shell.
Bruce remains trapped in darkness. So that's my first look at Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. If you like this content, be sure to click that subscribe button, and while you're at it, hit the bell to receive notifications when I upload new videos. But a word of warning. Yeah, I'd just like to take a moment to thank Man of Steel Answers Inside Commentary as well as the JLU podcast for their inspiring discussions and analyses. Also a huge thank you to all the wonderful folks who've contributed towards BVS Reference on Twitter and Vero. This is not the end though, there's so much more to discover. As Senator Finch said, truth is a conversation, and that conversation can continue down in the comment section. I've also linked a couple of other analyses in the video description, so check those out as well. Thank you for watching, and as always, I wish you peace, joy, and love.